Hey, you up? Wake up, sleepyhead. The sun's out. There we go. I don't know how you manage to be even more beautiful every single day. Work. I didn't mention it, but I have a day off today. I wanted to spend it with you. Let's go and have breakfast. Nope, not that way. I know that's the kitchen, love, but I have a little surprise for you. I mean, it's a beautiful sunny day. Let's take advantage of it, shall we? Come out to the garden. Yep. You've been talking about picnics for a while now, right? I thought we could have breakfast outside. I packed some coffee, the way you like it. I have a bowl of strawberries as well. And do you remember that recipe? The one with the cinnamon pancake rolls? I made it this morning while you were still sleeping. Here, I bought this book from the library as well. Just in case you want to read a bit. I brought my own as well. Just in case you want to read a bit. I brought my own as well. Hey, I just wanted to ask you something. Last night, while you were sleeping, I saw you were having nightmares. Is everything okay, my love? Thought so. What were they about? I see. I don't blame you. I'd be terrified if I were you. Is there anything I can do to help with those nightmares? I want you to be able to relax. Read you my book? Anything for you, milady, but this is a kid's storybook. What? I like them. Don't poke fun at me, Missy. Oh, you little brat. Fine, fine. These are Beedle the Bard's tales, so don't complain if you've heard of them before. I'll start with my favourite, The Tale of Three Brothers.
There were once 3 brothers who were travelling along a lonely, winding road at twilight. In time, the brothers reached a river too deep to wade through and too dangerous to swim across. However, these brothers were learned in the magical arts, and so they simply waved their wands and made a bridge appear across the treacherous water. They were halfway across it when they found their path blocked by a hooded figure, and it was Death. He was angry that he had been cheated out of 3 new victims, for travellers usually drowned in the river. But Death was cunning. He pretended to congratulate the 3 brothers upon their magic, and said that each had earned a prize for being clever enough to evade him. So the oldest brother, who was a combative man, asked for a wand more powerful than any in existence, a wand that must always win battles for its owner, a wand worthy of a wizard who had conquered death. So Death had crossed to an elder tree on the banks of the river, fashioned a wand from a branch that had hung there, and gave it to the oldest brother. Then the second brother, who was an arrogant man, decided that he wanted to humiliate Death still further, and asked for the power to recall others from death. So Death picked up a stone from the riverbank and gave it to the second brother, and told him that the stone would have the power to bring back the dead. Finally, Death turned to the third brother. A humble man, he asked for something that would enable him to go forth from that place without being followed by Death. And so it was that Death reluctantly handed over his own cloak of invisibility. In due course, the brothers separated, each for his own destination. The first brother travelled for a week or more, and reaching a distant village, sought out a fellow wizard, with whom he had a quarrel. Naturally, with the Elder Wand as his weapon, he could not fail to win the duel that followed. Leaving his enemy dead upon the floor, the oldest brother proceeded to an inn, where he boasted of the powerful wand which he had snatched from Death himself, and of how it made him invincible. That very night, another wizard crept upon the oldest brother as he lay wine-sodden upon his bed. The thief took the wand, and, for good measure, slit the oldest brother's throat. And so, Death took the first brother for his own. Meanwhile, the second brother journeyed to his own home, where he lived alone. Here, he took out the stone which had the power to recall the dead, and turned it thrice in his hand. To his amazement and delight, the figure of the girl he had once hoped to marry, before her untimely death, appeared at once before him. Yet she was sad and cold, separated from him as though by a veil. Though she had returned to the mortal world, she did not truly belong there, and suffered. Finally, the second brother, driven mad by hopeless longing, killed himself so as to truly join her. And so Death took the second brother for his own. But though Death searched for the third brother for many years, he was never able to find him. It was only when he had attained a great age that the youngest brother finally took off the cloak of invisibility and gave it to his son. And then he greeted Death as an old friend, went with him gladly, and as equals they departed this life.
Did you like that one? I really like the next one I'm about to read.
There was once a kindly old wizard who used his magic generously and wisely for the benefit of his neighbors. Rather than reveal the true source of his power, he pretended that his potions, charms, and antidotes sprang ready-made from the little cauldron he called his lucky cooking pot. From miles around, people came to him with their troubles, and the wizard was pleased to give his pot a stir and put things right. This well-beloved wizard lived to a goodly age, then died, leaving all his chattels to his only son. This son was of a very different disposition to his gentle father. Those who could not work magic were, to the son's mind, worthless, and he had often quarreled with his father's habit of dispensing magical aid to their neighbors. Upon the father's death, the son found hidden inside the old cooking pot a small package bearing his name. He opened it, hoping for gold, but found instead a soft, thick slipper, much too small to wear, and with no pair. A fragment of parchment within the slipper bore the words, "In the fond hope, my son, that you will never need it." The son cursed his father's age-softened mind, then threw the slipper back into the cauldron, resolving to use it henceforth as a rubbish pail. That very night, a peasant woman knocked on the front door. "My granddaughter is afflicted by a crop of warts, sir," she told him. "Your father used to mix a special poultice in that old cooking pot." "Begone!" cried the son. "What care I for your brat's warts?" And he slammed the door in the old woman's face. At once there came a loud clanging and banging from his kitchen. The wizard lit his wand and opened the door, and there, to his amazement, he saw his father's old cooking pot. It had sprouted a single foot of brass, and was hopping on the spot, in the middle of the floor, making a fearful noise upon the flagstones. The wizard approached it in wonder, but fell back hurriedly when he saw that the whole of the pot's surface was covered in warts. "Disgusting object!" he cried, and he tried firstly to vanish the pot, then to clean it by magic, and finally to force it out of the house. None of his spells worked, however, and he was unable to prevent the pot hopping after him out of the kitchen and then following him up to bed, clanging and banging loudly on every wooden stair. The wizard could not sleep all night for the banging of the warty old pot by his bedside, and next morning the pot insisted upon hopping after him to the breakfast table. Clang, clang, clang went the brass-footed pot, and the wizard had not even started his porridge when there came another knock on the door. An old man stood on the doorstep. "'Tis my old donkey, sir," he explained. "Lost she is, or stolen, and without her I cannot take my wares to market, and my family will go hungry tonight." "And I am hungry now!" roared the wizard, and he slammed the door upon the old man. Clang, clang, clang went the cooking pot's single brass foot upon the floor, but now its clamour was mixed with the brays of a donkey and human groans of hunger, echoing from the depths of the pot. "Be still, be silent," shrieked the wizard, but not all his magical powers could quieten the warty pot, which hopped at his heels all day, braying and groaning and clanging, no matter where he went or what he did. That evening there came a third knock upon the door, and there on the threshold stood a young woman sobbing as though her heart would break. "My baby is grievously ill," she said. "Won't you please help us? Your father bade me come if troubled." But the wizard slammed the door on her, and now the tormenting pot filled to the brim with salt water and slopped tears all over the floor as it hopped and brayed and groaned and sprouted more warts. Though no more villagers came to seek help at the wizard's cottage for the rest of the week, the pot kept him informed of their many ills. Within a few days, it was not only braying and groaning and slopping and hopping and sprouting warts, it was also choking and retching, crying like a baby, whining like a dog, and spewing out bad cheese and sour milk and a plague of hungry slugs. The wizard could not sleep or eat with the pot beside him, but the pot refused to leave, and he could not silence it or force it to be still. At last the wizard could bear it no more. "Bring me all your problems, all your troubles and your woes!" he screamed. fleeing into the night, with the pot hopping behind him along the road into the village. "Come! Let me cure you, mend you, and comfort you. I have my father's cooking pot, and I shall make you well." And with the foul pot still bounding along behind him, he ran up the street, casting spells in every direction. Inside one house, the little girl's warts vanished as she slept. The lost donkey was summoned from a distant briar patch and set down softly in its stable. The sick baby was doused in dittany and woke, well and rosy. At every house of sickness and sorrow, the wizard did his best, and gradually the cooking pot beside him stopped groaning and retching, and became quiet, shiny and clean. "Well, Pot?" asked the trembling wizard as the sun began to rise. The pot burped out the single slipper he had thrown into it, and permitted him to fit it onto the brass foot. Together, they set off back to the wizard's house, the pot's footstep muffled at last. But from that day forward, the wizard helped the villagers like his father before him, lest the pot cast off its slipper and begin to hop once more.
That piece of cinnamon pancake looks delicious. Mind giving me a slice? You're bad, milady. I made those myself. Okay, I'll read you one more story, but promise me you'll feed me. A long time ago, in a far-off land, there lived a foolish king who decided that he alone should have the power of magic. He therefore commanded the head of his army to form a brigade of witch hunters and issued them with a pack of ferocious black hounds. At the same time, the king caused proclamations to be read in every village and town across the land, wanted by the king, an instructor in magic. No true witch or wizard dared volunteer for the post, for they were all in hiding from the brigade of witch hunters. However, a cunning charlatan with no magical power saw a chance of enriching himself and arrived at the palace, claiming to be a wizard of enormous skill. The charlatan performed a few simple tricks, which convinced the foolish king of his magical powers, and was immediately appointed Grand Sorcerer-in-Chief, the king's private magic master. The charlatan bade the king give him a large sack of gold, so that he might purchase wands and other magical necessities. He also requested several large rubies to be used in the casting of curative charms, and a silver chalice or two for the storing and maturing of potions. All these things the foolish king supplied. The charlatan stowed the treasure safely in his own house and returned to the palace grounds. He did not know that he was being watched by an old woman who lived in a hovel on the edge of the grounds. Her name was Babbity, and she was the washerwoman who kept the palace linen soft, fragrant, and white. Peeping from behind her drying sheets, Babbity saw the charlatan snap 2 twigs from one of the king's trees and disappear into the palace. The charlatan gave one of the twigs to the king and assured him that it was a wand of tremendous power. "It will only work, however," said the charlatan, "when you are worthy of it." Every morning the charlatan and the foolish king walked out into the palace grounds, where they waved their wands and shouted nonsense at the sky. The charlatan was careful to perform more tricks, so that the king remained convinced of his grand sorcerer's skill, and of the power of the wands that had cost so much gold. One morning, as the charlatan and the foolish king were twirling their twigs and hopping in circles and chanting meaningless rhymes, a loud cackling reached the king's ears. Babbity the washerwoman was watching the king and the charlatan from the window of her tiny cottage, and was laughing so hard she soon sank out of sight, too weak to stand. "I must look most undignified to make the old washerwoman laugh so," said the king. He ceased his hopping and twig twirling, and frowned. "I grow weary of practice. When shall I be ready to perform real spells in front of my subjects, sorcerer?" The charlatan tried to soothe his pupil, assuring him that he would soon be capable of astonishing feats of magic. But Babbity's cackling had stung the foolish king more than the charlatan knew. "Tomorrow," said the king, "we shall invite our court to watch their king perform magic." The charlatan saw that the time had come to take his treasure and flee. "Alas, your majesty, it is impossible. I had forgotten to tell your majesty that I must set out on a long journey tomorrow. If you leave this palace without my permission, sorcerer, my brigade of witch hunters will hunt you down with their hounds. Tomorrow morning you will assist me to perform magic for the benefit of my lords and ladies. And if anybody laughs at me, I shall have you beheaded. The king stormed back to the palace, leaving the charlatan alone and afraid. Not all his cunning could save him now, for he could not run away, nor could he help the king with magic that neither of them knew. Seeking a vent for his fear and his anger, the charlatan approached the window of Babbity the washerwoman. Peering inside, he saw the little old lady sitting at her table, polishing a wand. In a corner behind her, the king's sheets were washing themselves in a wooden tub. The charlatan understood at once that Babbity was a true witch, and that she, who had given him his awful problem, could also solve it. "Crone!" roared the charlatan. "Your cackling has cost me dear. If you fail to help me, I shall denounce you as a witch, and it will be you who is torn apart by the king's hounds." Old Babbity smiled at the charlatan and assured him that she would do everything in her power to help. The charlatan instructed her to conceal herself inside a bush while the king gave his magical display, and to perform the king's spells for him, without his knowledge. Babbity agreed to the plan, but asked one question. "What, sir? If the king attempts a spell, Babbity cannot perform." The charlatan scoffed. "Your magic is more than equal to that fool's imagination," he assured her, and he retired to the castle, well pleased with his own cleverness. The following morning, all the lords and ladies of the kingdom assembled in the palace grounds. The king climbed onto a stage in front of them, with the charlatan by his side. "I shall firstly make this lady's hat disappear," cried the king, pointing his twig at a noblewoman. From inside a bush nearby, Babbity pointed her wand at the hat and caused it to vanish. Great was the astonishment and admiration of the crowd, and loud their applause for the jubilant king. "Next, I shall make that horse fly!" cried the king, pointing his twig at his own steed. From inside the bush, Babbity pointed her wand at the horse, and it rose high into the air. The crowd was still more thrilled and amazed, and they roared their appreciation of their magical king. "And now," said the king, looking all around for an idea, and the captain of his brigade of witch hunters ran forwards. "Your Majesty," said the captain, "this very morning, Sabre died of eating a poisonous toadstool. Bring him back to life, Your Majesty, with your wand." And the captain heaved onto the stage the lifeless body of the largest of the witch-hunting hounds. The foolish king brandished his twig and pointed it at the dead dog. But inside the bush, Babbity smiled and did not trouble to lift her wand, for no magic can raise the dead. When the dog did not stir, the crowd began first to whisper and then to laugh. They suspected that the king's first 2 feats had been mere tricks after all. "Why doesn't it work?" the king screamed at the charlatan, who bethought himself of the only ruse left to him. "There, Your Majesty, there," he shouted, pointing at the bush where Babbity sat concealed. "I see her plain, a wicked witch who is blocking your magic with her own evil spells. Seize her, somebody, seize her." Babbity fled from the bush, and the brigade of witch hunters set off in pursuit, unleashing their hounds, who bayed for Babbity's blood. But as she reached a low hedge, the little witch vanished from sight, and when the king, the charlatan, and all the courtiers gained the other side, they found the pack of witch-hunting hounds barking and scrabbling around a bent and aged tree. "She has turned herself into a tree!" screamed the charlatan, and, dreading lest Babbity turn back into a woman and denounce him, he added, "Cut her down, Your Majesty. That is the way to treat evil witches." An axe was brought at once, and the old tree was felled to loud cheers from the courtiers and the charlatan. However, as they were making ready to return to the palace, the sound of loud cackling stopped them in their tracks. "Fools!" cried Babbity's voice from the stump they had left behind. "No witch or wizard can be killed by being cut in half. Take the axe, if you do not believe me, and cut the grand sorcerer in two." The captain of the brigade of witch hunters was eager to make the experiment, but as he raised the axe, the charlatan fell to his knees, screaming for mercy and confessing all his wickedness. As he was dragged away to the dungeons, the tree stump cackled more loudly than ever. "By cutting a witch in half, you have unleashed a dreadful curse upon your kingdom," it told the petrified king. "Henceforth, every stroke of harm that you inflict upon my fellow witches and wizards will feel like an axe stroke in your own side until you will wish you could die of it." At that, the king fell to his knees too, and told the stump that he would issue a proclamation at once, protecting all the witches and wizards of the kingdom and allowing them to practice their magic in peace. "Very good," said the stump, "but you have not yet made amends to Babbity." Anything at all," cried the foolish king, wringing his hands before the stump. "You will erect a statue of Babbity upon me in memory of your poor washerwoman, and to remind you forever of your own foolishness," said the stump. The king agreed to it at once, and promised to engage the foremost sculptor in the land and have the statue made of pure gold. Then the shamed king and all the noble men and women returned to the palace, leaving the tree stump cackling behind them. When the grounds were deserted once more, there wriggled from a hole between the roots of the tree stump a stout and whiskery old rabbit with a wand clamped between her teeth. Babbity hopped out of the grounds and far away, and ever after a golden statue of the washerwoman stood upon the tree stump, and no witch or wizard was ever persecuted in the kingdom again. "Now give me some pancakes,"